So good morning all. Jayant, thank you. Thank you India Foundation for having me here this morning. Since I've been, in a sense, chosen to start the proceedings or speak first, let me straight off also answer you again, Jayant. I think without a doubt, there will be very few people in this country who believes that the government is actually, governance is what they want. I mean, it is what they, the governance that they experience is what they want. I think it's a resounding no. You've posed 4 questions, and let me just before that say this, and I've said this multiple times as somebody sitting on the intersection of having some time as an entrepreneur in the telecom sector. I mean, there is being an entrepreneur in India and then there's being an entrepreneur in the telecom sector. They are 2 different types of activity. I've been an entrepreneur. I've been 10 years a politician, and I also sit at the intersection somewhere as somebody with some interest in media. So let me approach this from that perspective. And I'm sure all of you have very different perspectives on this. We proudly claim, and we repeat this quite often, that India and economic reform started in the 90s. And it's something that we say this quite often. And the evidence is out there for everybody to see. The private sector and private capital in the Indian economy and in India per se has expanded significantly. We are a multi-trillion-dollar economy today, and primarily on the back of private capital, private investment, private entrepreneurship, and obviously the expanding government headroom in terms of government finances. But I never tire of saying this, and I say this again as a starting point for this, which is while private sector has reformed and has seen more competition and consumers of benefit, government as an institution or as a collection of institutions have stayed pretty much where they are in the 90s. And you've seen this in the last several years in terms of scams, you've seen this in terms of dubious public policy decision makings at various levels of the central government, state government, and the city governments, that government as an institution today remains remarkably opaque, transparent, and entrenched in the past, but with a double whammy of having been given a lot more money and a lot more assets to handle and manage. So it is the worst of both worlds. You have governance that has not reformed, progressed, or become more transparent. At the same time, that same institution has been given the task of handling substantially more public money and public assets. So I will very quickly address all 4 points of yours. Is the governance model today rooted in our ethos? So that begs the question, what is this ethos of our governance? What is it that we expect? And the one word that I have heard that pretty much describes it and is very easy to understand is Suraja, which is good governance. And to answer your question, Jayant, no, we are not at Suraja. So, and I think the conversation will be, how do we get to Suraja? So I've answered that. Now, the different branches of government, you know, there is this conventional debate going on between the tussle between the executive and the judiciary, and I'm focusing on that because you raised that point. I come at this slightly differently, and I may be in the minority in this audience. I believe that judicial intervention is a cause rather than an effect. Oh, sorry, an effect rather than a cause. And that is because, for example, I'll give you a clear, sharp example of how governments fail and executives fail their citizens, and judiciary has to step in. In my city of Bengaluru, the local government proposes a 2,000 crore steel flyover project. No public consultation, no environment clearance. Citizens are all crying themselves hoarse. Media is going blue in the face opposing it. But the governments continue. And it requires an NGT and it requires a high court to intervene to put a stop on what is ostensibly an executive decision. So I think we have to look at this from a point of view of, yes, these are checks and balances, but what is the necessary levels of checks and balances that are acceptable or not? So that's the second point. The third point is, you touched upon the governance layers, and I say this again with some experience of this. Our democracy is a 3-layer governance structure. We have the central government, we have the state government and legislatures, and we have the city and the panchayats. It is clear that in the last 2 years, there has been a substantial cleaning up and reform and transformation of the government as an institution and collection of institutions in the center. On that, there is no doubt. And that is an accepted fact, not just by me or all of us, but by people all over the world. But where the problem still remains and is in proportions and is really a clear and present danger to our democracy is at the urban governance level and in some cases at the state legislature and state government level. So there is a need to focus, while we talk about governance, not just at institutions in Delhi or institutions at the central level, but also institutions at the urban and the urban panchayat, the third tier, and the state levels. On the fourth point you asked, you posed the question, Jayant, political parties and their performance. I've just come out of a 2-day one rank, one pension powwow with, on social media with a certain young leader of a certain old party. And I can comfortably affirm to the fact that political parties can do a lot more in terms of sending people to, and choosing people to be the candidates and to be their representatives of the people. Political parties, there are some, like the BJP and other constituents of the NDA, that have clearly shaped political vision, economic vision. And there are too many political parties that have made it their business to be just carping and just oppose. And that is no ideology. And I think there is a need for a discourse and a discussion about what political parties stand for. They must stand up and be very clear and be counted in terms of their original ideas and not just photo ops and tragedy tourism. So I will end with that, and I'm quite happy to then part in the conversation subsequently. Thank you so much for having me.